Hey there, IT crowd. Welcome back to Inspector Toolbelt Talk. Today we're going to talk about a question that comes up a lot. Should we do an inspection for a tenant? Now, let me be clear. First of all, we're talking about residential tenants. Commercial tenants, that's a whole different business, whole different situation. So today we're going to talk about inspecting for residential tenants. So me, as a home inspection company owner, I do not, and none of us do any inspections for tenants. And I'll explain why in just a moment. But the question first that we need to answer is, can a tenant request a home inspection? Is it even legal for them to do it because they don't own the property? Well, if we go to Home Inspector Pro, actually, they had a really good article that somewhat touched on this in some areas. And I'm actually going to quote them here. So if we look at their website, they have an article on that. It says, can a tenant request an inspection? Is it legal? So yes, renters can request inspections. Tenant inspection rights and rental inspection laws are fairly consistent across the country and are legal in most cases. But it also brings out that there are a few exceptions. And here's the first reason why I personally do not inspect for tenants, because I really don't want to be looking at their lease agreement and trying to interpret it to see if any of these things are valid. So first of all, while rare, an inspection can violate a renter's lease if the lease explicitly states they cannot request an inspection. To be honest with you, I've seen it before. I didn't see it directly in the lease. I didn't review their lease, but I remember explicitly the client saying, even though it says that I can't get an inspection, yada, yada, yada. And a lot of, especially multi-complex owners or people who have multiple properties, they're going to put something like that in there because they don't want some home inspector coming in and inspecting their property, calling out 30 different things that are, in their opinion, fine, whatever opinion they have going on there. So unless we read their lease, we don't really know if we have the legal right to be there. With a real estate transaction, we do. Typically, that's going to be baked in. The real estate agents are going to give us access, or someone's going to give us the code. The seller knows that we're there, the whole 9 yards. So unless we're reading their lease, we're not going to know if we have the right to be there. The second thing is the tenant has to pay for the inspection themselves. And sometimes tenants will request an inspection and they'll say, I love it when they say this, the landlord should have to pay for this. So he'll send you a check. Landlord probably doesn't even know about this inspection. So payment issues. Third point, you can only inspect areas accessible to the tenant, which doesn't necessarily include the entire property. So for instance, if the tenant has the right to inspect, very likely we can only inspect their unit. Their heating unit's probably in a basement. That's a common area. We're probably not going to be able to legally inspect the roof and the outside. So what's the point of walking around their unit looking at their carpets and windows? We might find a few things, but it's not going to be the quote unquote big stuff like structural issues, which we may find those. I'll acquiesce that we might find a structural issue, but we're not really going to be able to inspect it fully. And then the fourth point, and this one is a bit of a stretch for me, but it's applicable. A local housing authority may have tenant inspection rights and rental inspection laws specific to the community. Now, there is a small city close to me where when we do a home inspection, we actually get an exemption to have to follow these laws. So that, for instance, they have specific laws in that community for smoke detectors, CO detectors, entrance, egress, the whole 9 yards, even their deck and fire escapes. So when we do a home inspection, we actually get an exemption from that. It's baked into the law somehow, saying home inspection, they have their own SOP from New York State, etc. So if I'm doing an inspection for a tenant, that doesn't apply because there's no real estate transaction. I'm doing an inspection. So technically, in that community, I guess someone could make the argument that, hey, this isn't a real estate transaction. He's doing an inspection for a tenant. He has to follow these standards and laws. Again, a little bit of a stretch for me, but I could see it happening. So why would I not do an inspection for a tenant besides these points? Here's the main reasons. First of all, the juice always has to be worth the squeeze for me when it comes to an inspection. If I'm going to drive 2 hours to an inspection, I'm going to want to get paid for my drive time, wear and tear on my vehicle, all that other stuff. If I'm going to be doing a 6,000 square foot house, I'm going to charge more to have another inspector there. So there's 2 inspectors on the house, and then the coordinating of that, and any contractors might come in, specialty inspections, things like that. The juice always has to be worth the squeeze. Rental inspections for renters are almost never worth the juice. I've never seen one that is. I had one that was these people were renting this at the time, probably $700,000 house. And it's like, okay, I can kind of see it, but still not worth the squeeze for me. It's almost never worth the money. Are we going to get more than a regular inspection for the extra hassle? Those 4 points that we just went over, reviewing their lease agreement, making sure that we can be there, all this extra hassle. Whereas if somebody just calls us for a regular home inspection, we can just say, yeah, okay, we'll be there Thursday at 1:00. Tenant inspections are going to be more coordinating, more worrying, more researching. You might spend 2-3 hours before you even show up to the inspection, just looking at things and answering questions and asking questions. So, fiscally speaking, I've never been able to see why they're worth it, but that's not the main reason why. The main reason why is the possibility of being drawn into landlord-tenant litigation. I know attorneys that will not work for tenants or landlords because the tenant-landlord litigation is so messy and so nasty that it's just not worth it. So, think of the reasons why a tenant would want an inspection. How many tenants, if we're a tenant of a building, how many of us are going to say, you know what, I want to assist my landlord in taking care of the building, so I'd like to get an inspection first to know what I can pay for? That's not going to happen, right? That's not what tenants do. Typically, tenants are like, I think there's a problem, and I want to force my landlord to fix it. So either one, there isn't a problem, but the tenants are making a big deal about it, or there is a problem and the landlord's ignoring it. So usually by the time they've called us in, things have hit a really rough point in their relationship. So do we really want to be dragged into the litigation? Now, here's the thing with the litigation too. We're not talking expert witness testimony, which if you haven't listened to our podcast on that, go back and listen to it. Great business. We're not going to be called in as expert witness testimony for litigation for an inspection that we did. We're just going to get subpoenaed. So now we did a 2-hour inspection. Maybe we made $500, $600, whatever, and 2-3 hour inspection. And now we spent 2 hours ahead of time reading over their lease, trying to figure out if we can inspect, dealing with questions. And then afterwards, we have 2 police officers pull up into our driveway and give us a subpoena. We have to be in court next week. All right, so now we have to cancel an inspection. We sit there all morning. They try to get them to go to mediation. They don't, so they adjourn it till the next time. So then we go back again, and then we're called to the witness stand. We answer all these questions. Then we might get called back again. Then they might go to mediation. Oh my goodness. We have just spent 4 days of time for a one-time inspection. It's not fun. And let's look at it from the landlord's perspective too. Let's say you are an unscrupulous landlord. I don't think there's as many unscrupulous landlords as people say. I've met some really great landlords and some unscrupulous tenants, and I've met some unscrupulous landlords and really great tenants. It's a mixed bag. But let's say we're an unscrupulous, you say that word long enough, it doesn't sound like a word anymore, a bad landlord. So now, is he going to casually go, oh, you know what? I'm going to leave this inspector alone. Let's see what the courts say. No, he's gonna wreck us. He's gonna call us yelling and screaming. His attorneys are gonna come after us. He's gonna badmouth us to agents. He's going to leave us bad reviews all over and have all his family leave us bad reviews all over. Man, if we've ever been a part of any of that, we want a million miles away from it. So then comes in some other issues. So besides that, we don't really have a clear scope of expectation. So remember, when we're inspecting for real estate, we know what the expectation is. Does this work or does this not? A tenant views it as a very different type of inspection. Should it be fixed or not? Is this healthy for me and my family or not? Okay, it gets a little bit squishy there. It's not going to be as clear cut. So if I walk in and there's an older heating unit and it's functioning fine, I'm going to say older heating unit functioning fine, may go at any time. But now the tenant is going to say, well, I'm living here with this unit. I have no right to replace it. What can I do to use to get the landlord to replace this? Or the most common thing I've heard tenants say is lead paint. Is this lead paint peeling going to be bad for my family? Well, yeah, but I'm not a lead paint inspector here. I'm not testing for lead. So there's a different expectation with a tenant versus a regular real estate transaction. So the other thing that we want to mention, which we've already kind of touched on, is access, authority, and boundary issues. What do we have the right to inspect and what do we not? So for instance, let's give the example of we're walking through the tenant apartment and they showed us their lease. They have a right to inspect, but it excludes common areas. So now they say the basement's not a common area. It's where I go to do laundry. Okay, so we go down, we do the inspection, and all of a sudden the landlord's like, what are you doing in my basement? You have no right to be there. And it's in our report. We might be in some hot water because there's some arguable what's a common space happening there. It's like, well, the other tenant is allowed in there. They just don't. That is a common space. It's in a different part of the lease that you missed, or not in the lease, but it's just common knowledge. Attic spaces, second floor apartment. Oh yeah, you can go up in the attic. It's right there. You can only access it through my apartment. Isn't an attic space a common space to a building? Do we skip that or do we go in? So access, authority, and boundary issues really become a problem pretty quick with a tenant inspection. Then reporting obligations and regulatory code issues. We already touched on that slightly, but if we have an SOP with our state as home inspectors, we have to, generally speaking, give a good reason why we didn't inspect something. So is it that we did not know that it was a common space? We're going to be disclaiming large sections of our report. We're going to have an unhappy client. We're going to have a landlord that's not happy that we're there. And if there's even a slight mistake, like we didn't inspect the basement sink and we didn't write that down, and now the tenant who's already in litigation with an attorney, the attorney's like, oh, well, let's ping him on this now too, because they're just shotgunning everything with a lawsuit. So there's some squishy stuff happening there that personally I like to avoid. I like to do a home inspection. I like to have happy clients. I like to go home afterwards. I don't like to have the next 6 months be littered with phone calls and litigation and things like that. Another point is insurance and professional liability exposure. Check with your insurance company, because many errors and omissions providers and things like that might not include doing an inspection for a renter for those very reasons. They don't want to have third-party obligations. So now we may not have a legal standing, so to speak. And again, I'm not an attorney. I always check with the attorney and all of this stuff. But we may not have a legal standing with the landlord, but he may make it like he kind of does. So now our insurance kind of needs to get involved, and they're not going to like that. They may not cover us, or if they do cover us, our rates go up or whatever else happens. Also, marketing and client confusion. Rental inspections are not the same as a home inspection. And if we advertise that we inspect rental properties, is it going to be like for investors or for the actual tenant? So these are the reasons why, in my personal opinion, rather, we as inspectors really probably don't want to be messing with the whole rental inspection situation. Let them get specialists, let them get a local rental inspector. A lot of municipalities have that. Have them get their own contractors, a general contractor, whatever it takes, so that they can be satisfied with what they need. But ultimately for us, the juice is not worth the squeeze. But listen, you have a different opinion, you love doing rental inspections, or maybe you're in a municipality like Baltimore that has a special program that you're a part of. Cool. Leave some comments. We'd love to hear from you. Argue with me, agree with me, whichever you'd like. But either way, thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of Inspector Toolbelt Talk.